I was not one to believe in things such as ghosts. However, I was still an individual that was easily scared. My friends Mike and Chris would constantly take it upon themselves to scare me. Schemes such as jumping me from behind or telling me some scary story. These pointless acts did scare me, but at the end of the day, they were pranks. Amongst the stories and pranks they pulled, nothing stuck with me more than what I saw on the 3rd floor. Through my high school years, I went to a really old-fashioned school. The school at the time had 2 complexes on the campus. The one on the right side was a newer building, which was where most of my classes were held. On the other side was the original 3-floor complex, which was there from around the 1930s. We only had 2 classes there, as the school's shitty budget couldn't have all the students piled in one area. They used the downstairs of the old building for 2 classes and the school office on the 2nd floor. Since they had no use for the 3rd floor, they blocked it off from student entry. The 3rd floor used to be upstairs dorm rooms, as the school back in its day was a boarding house for girls. As you would expect, students concocted rumors about what could be up there. Some of these claims were ridiculous, like the school hiding rotting corpses in the floorboards. Honestly, I just ignored most of these claims. Naturally, Chris and Mike were always curious as to what was up in there, and constantly urged me to go up with them. I, of course, constantly turned them down, not out of fear but out of concern for being suspended. However, through peer pressure, I finally decided to go up. That was the last mistake I would ever make. It was around December that my school would always hold an annual Christmas party. These parties went on quite late, with most of the teachers drinking themselves to the point of being totally oblivious. Of course, my friends took this as a perfect opportunity to sneak up to the 3rd floor of the school. Mike then once again asked me if I wanted to come. At first I said no, like I had time and time again. "Come on," Mike kept insisting. I sighed, perhaps it could be a bit interesting. Plus the building was empty, which meant we wouldn't be caught. "Fine," I finally said. As I did, Mike's face lit up as he shouted, "Yes!" while patting me on the back. I felt a bit happy, knowing my friends really wanted me along with them. Mike went to get Chris, who'd basically go anywhere Mike went. I followed them over the campus. I was as nervous as anyone could be. No, nervous would be a small way to put it. Petrified would be the better term. I kept thinking, why am I doing this? Am I crazy? As I slowly moved next to Chris, he kept on telling me to calm down, but it was never that easy to me. I kept glancing over as we ran over to the old complex, afraid that we might be caught. To be honest, part of me wanted us to get caught. Looking back now, I wish we had been. Mike led us into the main hall of the school. The lights were turned off, no shock there. Mike fumbled until he found a light switch. As the lights went on, I could see an expression of excitement on his face. Wish I had the same feeling. Chris and I followed behind Mike to the 3rd floor staircase. I glanced up and saw the regular "Do Not Enter" sign that was stuck onto the rotting wood. I shrugged this off the best I could. Lucky for us, the wood wasn't high at all, an example of the school's cheap security. Mike slowly climbed over the wood, motioning for us to follow. At this point, my mind was screaming for me to run, so it was either stay or ditch your 2 friends. I sighed and slowly followed Chris as he climbed over the wood. I stepped onto the staircase. The creaking from it unnerved me a bit, wondering if this floor was stable. Still, it was a minor concern. I followed Chris to the top as Mike was already looking around. I reached the last step and glanced around the top floor. It was surprisingly very well preserved despite the dust and fading paint on the walls. It had a very damp smell which reminded me of dirty laundry. Mike started to dart around the floor, eagerly looking for something interesting. Chris followed him like a puppy, typical behavior for him. I slowly followed them into one of the dorm rooms. It was very dusty, with nothing but a worn-out bed in the center. I kept looking behind my back, half expecting someone to be there. Nothing. The shadows must be getting to me, I thought. We took a look in the other rooms, finding the same thing, one bed in each room. Nothing that special. I could see Mike was getting annoyed, poor guy, I thought. I laughed in my head at myself about being afraid of this place. Turns out it was nothing but a dump. No ghosts or corpses, just an old floor. Mike gave up looking and began to make his way downstairs with Chris. I followed behind them slowly, still looking over my back. I will admit I was still a bit nervous. I mean, the place was still eerie. As I reached the staircase, I heard a voice from below. I stepped back as I recognized the voice. It was the school janitor. He'd caught Mike and Chris climbing over the wood. I began to panic. Not wanting to get caught, I darted into one of the dorms. I quickly hid in the corner of one of the rooms, waiting for Chris and Mike to be escorted out. Some friends I have? I thought, feeling guilty. I slumped onto the floor and waited. It was quiet. The wood didn't even creak. The only light was the moonlight through the window. The silence began to bother me. I kept thinking that someone was waiting for me to get up. After at least 3 minutes, I couldn't take it anymore. I jolted up and went into the hallway on the floor. As I moved for the staircase, I saw something catch my eye. I froze in place, not wanting to turn around. I felt a cold feeling that I wasn't alone up here, that someone was behind me. I kept telling myself to run, but I couldn't help but look. I regret everything I did at that moment. I turned around to find what appeared to be a girl at the end of the hall. She was spaced and had not noticed me. My mind was racing, trying to find out who this girl was and why she was up here. I began to step back, telling myself to run. Then I heard the floor creak beneath me. It made me jump at the same time, making the girl face me. I froze in place as she looked at me. The girl looked at me so wide-eyed, as if her eyes were going to pop. Her eyes were a black color. Her face looked dirty and slightly rotted, and she wore a worn-out dress. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. For that moment, I never took my eyes off of her. I kept waiting for her to do something, but she stood still. She just stared at me for what felt like forever. I needed to get out of there. I kept repeating to myself to run, 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 run. I finally began to step backward. As I did, the girl jerked and began to scream. My blood ran cold as I forced myself to run to the wooden barrier. To my horror, I could hear the scream getting louder. She was coming for me. I panicked, fumbling over the wood. I fell over the other side. Ignoring the pain, I made a dash for the main hall. I didn't dare turn around. I finally made it outside. Taking a second to catch my breath, I found Chris and Mike waiting for me. Mike asked me where I was in a rage, but I barely heard him. I was in shock. My heart was racing to the point where I collapsed onto the ground. Mike and Chris asked me worriedly, "What the hell happened?" But I could never answer. After that night, I could never look up at my old school complex the same way. I always knew that girl was up there. You would have expected me to tell someone, but I never did. No one would believe me anyway. I still couldn't believe it. It's been 3 years and I've finally graduated from school. Life is good. I've had no reason since that night to feel afraid of anything. That was until graduation day. After my graduation, I was leaving in my car parked near the old building. Not thinking about it, I looked up at the third-floor window. I then stopped. Staring back at me through the dusty glass was a pair of wide, dark eyes.